I knew Calvin wouldn't start with my face. That's always a big letdown when you start with my face. I try to hold my belly in, but I can only do that for about 29 seconds. We're right on top of Lyon Mountain on the 7th day of June, 2011. How did it get to be June already?
Time goes by.
Time flies when you're having fun. You know something? I love old railroad stations. I was brought up in the steam train age, as some of us older folks here might have been.
Be careful.
When the trains went through a lot of these North Country communities, and if it hadn't been for the railroad, there wouldn't be much of a Lyon Mountain history, right, when you stop to think about it.
Very true.
And there's something going on here that is the envy of small towns all over America. How many times have you gone through a small town, seen a beautiful old railroad station, and say, wow, I wish they could restore that, including railroad stations in a lot of little towns that I've lived in my long life. Well, some people have started and failed. Some people are still trying to raise money to restore their railroad stations. Calvin and I have viewed quite a few. Some made it, and some failed along the way. But guess what? There's a hardy crew up here in Lyon Mountain. We have a group called the Friends.
That's right.
Of Lyon Mountain that started out as a Chateaugay Lake historical group, right?
Right. Chateaugay Lake Arts Association.
And that's how it began. I've got Margot Kurowski here. Mm-hmm. I've got Ves Pivetta, and I got Frenchie Siskavich over in the corner. Is that a Lyon Mountain name or what?
Well, it's a Lyon Mountain Lithuanian name.
You know what I love? When our good friend Larry Gooley first wrote his book.
The book.
And he started coming up here talking to people and gathering photographs. And he showed me all the old grave sites, all the old cemetery stones, and some of those names, I don't know how they got all the letters on the stones. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is.
How this all started.
It was quite a melting pot.
Margot, were you here from the beginning? Ves, were you involved in this from the beginning?
Yes. My little history is I was born in Italy. Came over here.
Come on.
Yes, I was.
He's not making this up, is he, French?
No, he's not.
No, I came over here when I was 11 years old.
Notice his Italian accent.
And my father was a miner. And make a long story short, he came over in 1928. He left my mother and 3 kids over in Italy, and everybody did the same thing. They came over to the new country and hoping to raise a couple $1,000s and go back and pick up their wives and pick the family up.
Heard that story?
The big story on this is 10 years went by before my father came home to pick my mother up. Because of depression and things weren't working good in the mines. Anyway, he came home after 10 years, and that's when I was made. After 10 years, my mother was 8 months pregnant.
Good breakfast cereal. I think they called it Pep.
Too much
Didn't
wine.
They call it
Too much wine.
Oh.
Anyway, my mother was 8 months pregnant, and World War II was just breaking out. And she told my father, "You better go back over to the United States. Let me have the baby, and we'll be over." Well, 10 more years went by. So the nicest thing about this story. Even though my parents were separated 20 years, other than the 8 months in between, after he retired from here in 1962, they went back to Italy, never came back here.
Come on!
And they lived to be...
What a story!
My father lived to be 93, and my mother 91.
Don't you love it?
They had their own wine vineyard. They made approximately 600 gallons of wine. And they lived happily ever after. And
I love stories that have happy endings. I didn't know where you were going with it, Ves, but
that's it.
I
miss my parents. I only seen them maybe 6 times in 30 years, but it was worth it to them because, you know, they never accomplished the language too good. They never had a vehicle, and it was hard for them here.
It was hard for
a lot of people.
Even Frenchie's family, Lithuanians, you had Russians, You had Polish people, Swedes, Mexican, Spanish,
Germans.
with Germans. We had them all right here in Lyon Mountain, New York. And
It was a melting, they
It
call
was
the
a
United States a melting pot, but this
yeah,
was.
and miners were from all over the world. I mean, you work, so you'll know, Gordy, 2,200 feet down is
Oh,
the
yeah.
mine.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, there was heavy drinkers, non-drinkers. I mean, this was a beer town and a,
And a
you know,
baseball
and
town.
a baseball
Town.
town. And a big baseball town.
You know what? I think it's
We'll
important.
get
to
going
point-
on some other stories.
Could I
here
go
that,
back to the Chattagay Lake
Why,
Association?
why don't you?
I just want to say that only because there were a lot of people involved to get this station set for our museum. They started in the late 1990s giving minor days and,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
doing
sure.
a lot of work to get those things done. And they decided, because there were so many people excited about them, that they should have a place to keep their archives. So they looked around and decided to buy the old station. Well, it was in terrible shape, Gordy.
Well, we're talking 1903, right?
It was built in 1903, and it had been through a lot of changes. I mean, people remember it as Gregory's Tavern, and
Oh,
our
the
post office.
Post office, yeah.
Post office,
Post
Greg's
office, a
Tavern.
bar, tavern, I don't know what else.
So they bought it because of a really wonderful couple purchased the building for them, and then in 2000. And they worked
that's
6
11
years.
years ago already.
They worked 6 years.
We got a few
just-
flies up here, so
Yeah.
don't
Oh,
mind
yeah.
us if we're
Oh,
swinging
yeah.
our arms a little bit. We
Just-
don't hate each other. We're just
6 years just to get the building back in order. And another nice donation was to redo the roof for us. If it weren't for those
that's
major...
number one. You got to get the roof done,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And then, of course, we did get a grant, and that helped with the renovation. And then the exhibit started to happen in 2006,
How many times did you want to
2007.
give up?
We can probably do the same thing inside.
Yes.
about the
Yeah.
bugs.
How many times did you want to give up?
Oh, those
quite
people
a
are
few
so
times.
strong. They just kept going like Energizer bunnies.
It's a tough bunch. Before we go inside and get out of the bugs, I want to mention the fact that, number one, you know, we talk about God's country. This is beautiful country up here. This is just about as beautiful as it gets. If we get a chance to go on top of the sand pile, we'll let people
We
know
will. We will.
how beautiful it is. But I want people to know how famous these mines were. This was the one of the number one mining spots for iron ore
Iron
in the
ore.
entire United States.
Yes, they even
Entire
made.
world.
There was some ore. They tell me the old timers shipped to San Francisco for the bridge. Also, the Brooklyn Bridge got part of the ore that came out of this ground
Exactly.
right
Yeah,
here.
sure.
It was, and in the old days, you pick up a black rock, you could see the ore right into it. It was jet black, with different veins, different rocks, different, you know. But down there was number one stuff.
Yeah. The great stuff about it was that the impurities were less, so that it made a malleable steel.
During the war, World War II, this mine stayed open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
They were shipping stuff because this
Of
ore
course,
was
think about it.
the steel that they made from this ore was so great. They used it in tanks. They even made surgical equipment from this steel that was, or the ore that, you know, they made the steel. It was so great. In fact, it turned out that it was number one, even better than Norway. The iron ore from here.
You know, we've done several programs about mining. We went down to Port Henry, as many of our viewers know. We also did a series, a nice program, a slide program, with a professor from Plattsburgh State
Right.
about the forges, about all the
yeah.
all the forges around the North Country, all the smelting that was going on. So this was a big operation.
Very big, even in
it's-
Standish, New York, where now there's approximately maybe 75 people. At one time, there was 3,000 people, full of homes. There was a Standish blast
Of course
furnace
there was.
in Standish, New York. So, you know,
Now, who knows
Times
outside of
change.
this area? Who knows where Standish was?
Right, right.
And this is on the Standish Road, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
You can easily turn at the gas station at Lyon Mountain and head up the road, but if you're coming from the Dannemora way, you can turn up Saranac Street.
That's
It's
right.
just a fur piece up here, and here we are.
Nothing wrong with Gordy's memory, anyway.
Well, I was telling somebody last night as we sat on our back deck how many of the homes between here and Standish used to be log homes when they were first
There's still log
Oh,
homes
yes.
here.
Yeah, there's still
fixed
log homes.
over.
Most of them
Yeah.
are covered over now,
That's
and
right.
some got moved.
In fact, in 1956, the Republic Steel Corporation still owned the whole town. We were paying rent to Republic
Think
Steel.
about that for a minute.
And
It was a
we were
company
paying rent to
town.
We're a
Republic
company
Steel.
town,
There was a company. His name was John Galbraith. In fact, he even owned Chateauguay, the Chateauguay horse named Chateauguay, the one the Kentucky Derby
well,
one
I
time.
remember, yeah.
He owned that horse. Anyway, that's history. He purchased he purchased the whole town. Then he had a bunch of people come up. They went to every house, every individual house, and they would say, "Gordy, do you want to live in your house? Do you want to purchase your house?" Yes. You had first choice to purchase that house. If you didn't, you had to get out. And a lot of homes, like you see down here, these went for approximately $3,000, $2,600. The houses up where Frenchie and I live, they're called the new houses. They were built in 1948, 49. They went for $5,000.
Wow, big money.
So
Well, it was
anyway,
big
you had
money back in those days.
you had your, and you know, we were spoiled too because Republic Steel in those days, we didn't pay any school tax. We didn't pay any. They took care of the water. They took care of the fire department.
They owned everything. They made their own script. They had their
It
own
was
stores.
a company town.
Makes me want
Company town. You had a shop at the
Makes me want to
IGA
sing
store.
Tennessee Ernie for him. 16 tons, and what do you get? Well, that's just true. And how many
But,
towns like this have we been through
You know-
in Pennsylvania and West Virginia?
Yeah.
They talk about Lincoln being born in the log cabin. Well, it happened to be 84 years ago. I was born in the log
Come
cabin.
on,
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Never mind these guys. Now, were you and I? No, come on.
Yeah,
you were born in a
84
log
years
cabin.
old. I was
Yeah.
born in the log cabin.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna
We
now.
lived
I'm
in
gonna
log
sing
cabin.
"Born on a Tabletop in Tennessee." Oh, a mountaintop. I'm sorry.
You know, years in them days, people, if they had somebody in a family, say that their husband or somebody got killed in the mines, and they didn't have anybody to take his place, the company made a move because they wanted that house for
They
somebody
wanted
to
that
work in
house
the
for
house.
somebody to work.
Think
That's
about
right.
that. I mean, we're not gonna put peanut butter and jelly on this sandwich. We're gonna let people know what it was like before we
They
get
took
through.
they took in a lot of people took in borders just so that they could make
yeah.
ends meet. You
And
know,
keep their houses.
yeah, they keep their houses.
It was tough work too.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people couldn't talk English, and the only job they could do, like my father was one of them, pick and shovel. That's all that man did. He'll vouch
My
for
father-
that. And his father
My
did the
father
same
worked in
thing.
the mines. He worked in the mines. He lost a couple fingers, but he worked in the mines for over 50 years. He worked in the
Yeah.
mines when he come here. He come to Lyon Mountain in 1910. He come from Lithuania. He was only 18 years old. The first year when he landed in America, he worked in Pennsylvania in the coal mine for 1 year. That was 1909. 1910 he come here. 1923 he married my mother. 1926 I was born.
Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
In fact, there was
It's,
7 boys in our family. My oldest brother, he died in 1949. He got burnt here
He was.
working in the mill. At first, he worked in the mines. And what happened? They had a layoff. So the older men stayed in the mines. These guys had to come up in the surface and take
Yeah,
whatever
sure.
they
Oh,
could.
yeah.
And it happens that where he was working in the mill, a hose coming off of a kerosene torch. It sprayed him with kerosene, and over 3/4 of his body was third-degree burns. He lived. He went to Montreal. They brought him to Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal. He died in March of 1950.
Come on.
Yeah.
You lived that
Bro.
He was
long?
only 27 years old.
Yeah.
He had a wife and 2 young kids. The oldest was
You know,
a
there've been a
year-
lot of
You know what's wonderful? It was a horrific story, but it was a great example of this town because the town really rallied around Subby, and people gave skin and blood, and
There
That's
was,
the way they do in small towns.
Yeah. At that time, I think, I
Wow.
forget how many there were. I know I was one of them, but there was, I think at one time that 18 of us went to Royal Victoria, which they took 32 square inches of skin off on our stomachs.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a story.
Because his skin could not stop the blood.
Adapt, yeah.
He used this they put it on him just so
Like a
that it would
bandage.
stop the blood from
Yeah.
oozing out.
Oh my,
Yeah.
my. Now they got the artificial skin.
Oh,
and
now
everything else, but-
if that would have happened today,
And at that time too, the blood donors. It was nothing to have 200 blood donors come and give him blood, you know.
These are inspiring stories about Lyon Mountain and other towns. There used to be a record which got broken, and I ended up trying to save parts of it of the miners that were killed in the mines long before Larry Gooley ever decided to write his book. But OSHA wasn't the same
No.
in those days
No.
as it is now, and the conditions that these guys worked under were truly amazing. To me, it's incredible that more people didn't die in the mines than
Well,
did.
there
over
was
the
a goodly
years.
number that
we,
did
there
die.
were.
we had a total of 165 deaths here in Lyon Mountain.
Yeah.
But
There you
that's
go.
documented.
That's-
Yeah.
I'm sure
And
there
how
are
many?
more.
How many? There
Oh,
were?
in the old days,
There
I don't think they
there-
kept records.
there-
Right,
and there were
right.
cover-ups, as you know.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
boy,
yes.
sure.
You know what happens when we have mine
Yeah.
disasters? The company doesn't want people to know about it. We're going to move inside.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
idea.
We'll have some fun.
Very good idea.
I'll tell you something. If I ever get in a bar fight in Lyon Mountain, I want Margot on my side. You should have seen her go after those horseflies that followed us in.
I'm still
She
waiting.
wasn't stopping. I think I heard
was ready to hit
I think I heard an old machine gun going in the back. In the back. Well, we came inside. Once again, we're at this wonderful new mining and railroad museum in Lyon Mountain. It's great on the inside, great on the outside. If we do nothing else today, we're going to fill you so full of history, you might need to have a special operation when we finish with you. But the second thing we'd love to do is inspire you children and grandpa and grandma and aunts and uncles and get on up here. It's only 2 days a week though, Margot, right?
Right, Wednesdays and Saturdays,
From-
10 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
And before we go any farther, because we got 3 storytellers here, people, how are we going to talk for? No problemo. But I want to let people, these things don't happen by themselves. I started this program by indicating how hard it is to get a building like this, to get people behind it, and then to just root them a little bit to keep them going until the project is complete. But it doesn't stop there. It takes money. You people don't charge a penny.
We don't. Everything that
Can you
we,
believe other people charging $50 for a family?
Everything is donation here.
Right.
If they want to give, they don't have to. If they want to give, they can give donations.
And that's what we're going to mention several times. And if I forget, you're going to remind me. How can people send in donations to you? Is there a way?
well, you can become a member of the Friends of
That's what I
Lyon
meant.
Mountain.
And 2 different ways.
And they
At
can,
least 2 different ways. Go ahead.
well, they can just become a regular member for $15 a year, or they can become a lifetime member for $500.
There's my kind of plan. Yeah.
And we also have a donor board in our railroad room that you can purchase plates to remember your aunt, uncle, miner that you knew in memory of, and those are $100 a plate.
Isn't that
So,
great? Thus, how do you figure out where to start when a project like this gets underway?
When to start?
How
Well,
do you figure out, what are we gonna do? We got this old building, the roof's falling down.
Well, yeah.
We got sheetrock in here, we gotta,
you had meetings, a lot of meetings, and everybody took the bull by the horn and did this and that, and they had steps to go by. You know, what do we do
so
first?
you had the committee, you had a
Had a
group, a
committee, had a
nucleus
lot of
of
committees.
people.
that
Yeah.
Chattagay Lake
And,
Association.
Yeah, good
The
group.
collection of all these items was a big job. Frenchie was really involved, he and his wife in this thing.
Scarfing it up, right, Frenchie?
And
Yeah.
he was a big collector. Pete Quetchen, his brother-in-law, was a big
Oh, yeah,
factor.
yeah.
And his
His
wife
wife,
Rita.
His wife, Rita.
And Pickles Toloski.
Tony Shoes.
Tony
Oh,
Shoes.
gosh, yes.
And there was a lot of older
Actually,
people.
from the Chattagay Lake Association, fellas like Jim Humiston,
Yes, Jim and
Al
Mary.
Bailey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and
The Dubuque
Jane
Kelting.
Jane Kelting, the Bill Kelting,
Yeah,
and
there
you
was
know,
a
I mean,
lot of them.
they were
We'll
really.
forget some of these names as we go
Verney
along.
and Conrad
Yeah.
Dubukeford.
But a special
Conrad,
thanks now
yeah.
and throughout the program for all those people who stuck with it from the beginning.
Oh, really?
We've done a number of historical programs. I can't tell you how many since I started with Calvin in 1997. And we're always scrounging for old pictures, old mining memorabilia, you know, and you still are. Because you'll have some rotating exhibits
Oh,
here,
we
I'm
do.
sure, as time goes on.
We do. We have rotated, and people are just wonderful. I mean, they'll come in for a day of viewing, and they'll say, "Oh, my granddad had
There you go.
one of these. Could we give it to the museum?" So they continue
Okay.
to come in, and we love it. And even photos of their grandparents, if they worked in the mines. I would love that because eventually I'd like to have a wall of workers, you know, different kinds of workers. So pictures, we
Perfect.
love pictures anytime of people's
Our
relatives.
special thanks to our friend Larry Gooley from Bloated
Oh,
Toe
really?
Enterprises.
Yes.
He did a lot
let-
of research.
He has been directly and indirectly involved in this project. He's got so much on his website, so much information about Lyon Mountain and about this museum. I urge people to go on and check it out. I mean, the name Bloated Toe
I know.
is so odd that you never forget it once you hear it.
We had some.
He's publishing a children's book of mine right now, and people say, "Who's the publisher?" I said, "Bloated Toe." They say, "What?" Then I have to tell the whole story about how he and Jill were on top of a mountain.
You know, actually, Larry Cooley, I don't know how he got in touch with my sister-in-law, Rita Quetzin and Pete.
But he did, boy.
He
Yeah.
did, and,
Yeah,
and actually, he come up and he asked, I don't know how many questions he asked, you know, I mean, I could only tell him, Tony shows I could only tell him how much I knew. But when it come to putting the book of the guys, the pictures of the guys that are dead in there, he wasn't going to do it. I says, Larry, I says, you better do it because, I says, you know, I said, this is something that is history. These people
Yeah, I'll never
really
forget
died working in this place here to keep this place alive, you know.
He's a good historian.
He is,
He
he is.
insists on getting it right.
Yeah.
He does.
I mean, a lot of people write books and profess to be professional and amateur historians. And the books come out, and without mentioning any names, let me just say that sometimes the information is not always perfect.
right.
But when Larry does it, it's right. He goes over and over
He
and
does.
over and over and spends 20 hours a day,
Yeah.
and it shows. Larry's written 8 or 9 books, and I don't mind giving him a plug because we've done several interviews with
good
him.
writer.
He's a super guy, and Jill is wonderful at what she does. To have somebody like that who is willing to spend that much time promoting a small town on the mountain in northern New York,
You know,
right?
and I was told when he was in school, they said that he was a very, very brilliant man.
Well,
He was, I don't know, the way
He's too big for this town, but he will never move away. He loves it in a
no.
small town. He's
He
very,
was-
very humble.
Yeah.
I have to say that his sister-in-law, Reet, and brother-in-law, Peter Quetchen, they were historians all along. But they invited Larry Gooley to their porch, and they would have gatherings of miners and have like interview sessions. I don't know how many weekends or days that took place.
I don't know.
But that's where he learned a lot from those porch
I don't know how
visits.
you can sell a book like that for less than $100. I really don't. You know, if you got paid by the hour,
Oh, really?
he'd be in the poorhouse, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But it's nice to have people like that. It's nice to have people like Calvin Castine and Hometown Cable, who's been carrying that big camera on his shoulder since the early 80s.
Did you ever read the book about Bob Garrow? I'll tell you what.
Oh, yeah.
He did. Larry went right to the gist of the whole thing. Was
You mean
that he
the
said-
Bob Garrow.
The Bob.
He said.
Not the Bob Garrow we were talking
No.
about a little while ago.
What he said about that Bob Garrow was everything in there. I mean, I worked in the prison in Dannemora. I worked in the bug house when Garrow was there, and I'll tell you everything he told about Bob Garrow that was in the prison was really true.
And more.
And more.
There was a lot of information he couldn't even squeeze in the book. Yes, we've done, of course, we've not only read the book, but we've done television programs with him. And as all of the three of you know, and some of our viewers know, I was doing radio news back in those days at a local radio station. So that terror of the Adirondacks was a story that was fresh and poignant in my mind, along with all the other stuff that happened in Lyon Mountain and Dannemora with all the prison escapes and the whole 9 yards, you know. A lot of history in these little towns.
A lot of history.
You know, as I was going to say before, I'd like to tell you how probably most of the people got jobs in this town that come from the old country.
Yeah.
Well, like my father, or my grandfather. What happened is, like, the older people, my grandfather come over here first. His name was John Kafka, but the Lithuanian, it was named Kwiatkowska. So that was the Polish Lithuanian.
We made a few changes.
Well, anyways, I'll tell you how it was changed from Kwiatkowska to Kafka. My uncle Mike was in World War I. And the sergeant come up to him, he says, "You know something? How do you say your name?" He told him, he says, "Kwiatkowski." "Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to take K-A-S-K-A out of that name, and that's your name from now on." And that's how they wound up with Kafka.
The old priest wrote them down wrong when they came over from Montreal, and there's a number of different
anyways,
ways.
when the older people like my grandfather and them come over here first,
I love
most of these people, like I'll say Lithuania, they lived all in the same area. So when they got over here, what they would do is they'd notify the people over there. They'd write to them and say, "Come on over here, we got a job for you."
Oh, yeah.
So this is how a lot of these people, probably from Sweden, Germany, whatever it is, but this is the way it happened. Somebody was here first, working, and telling them, "We got work here for you." That's why they come over.
But not always, because the company would send people down to Ellis Island and also get people to come up that way.
Well, because they needed a lot of workers. I mean,
See, the same kind of story happened to my uncle here, Pete Pavetta. His name was Oliver. And the way he got the name Pete, when he started working here, he always signed his name Oliver P. Period. He never finished the Pavetta.
oh, come on.
His paycheck from the original company here had Oliver P.
Isn't that,
He
isn't
never
that
finished
wonderful?
Pavetta because
Never mind what's on the birth
nobody could spell it. And everybody in Lyon Mountain, New York, and Clinton County, he was a great bowler, knew my uncle as Pete. His name was Oliver. Nobody called him Oliver. But make a long story short, he came over.
You couldn't make a long story short if your life depended on it.
1921, my uncle left Italy with one suitcase and $20 Canadian dollars
How many times have we heard that?
in his pocket.
Yeah.
But his paperwork was for Quebec, not for United States. So he went to Quebec with $20 in his pocket. Didn't know a word of English. He was 17 years old. He had one address from somebody from the same town in northern Italy that lived in Quebec. So he flagged a taxi down. He didn't know even how to talk French or just Italian.
He knew how to do
So he showed the taxi driver the little piece of paper he had. The taxi driver charged him half of his money, $10. So
Boy, some things never change. You know?
to his name, he had $10.
Wow.
And his friend that he went to. Spaghetti factory, by the way.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
He was handling the big drums, 55-gallon drums of flour.
Yeah.
Okay, but he worked his way out of that. He worked his way up to Niagara Falls after 6-8 months on the Canadian side. And he worked there in a factory. One day, he got a letter from, his name was Giuseppe Danucci, an Italian fellow.
We're not making this up.
That was one of his friends from the old country that lived right here in Lyon Mountain, New York.
Oh, that's how it started.
So he said, Olivo, means Oliver, he said, they're hiring here in Lyon Mountain, New York. He says, come over and you got a job. So one Sunday afternoon, my uncle packed his suitcase, only one suitcase, and he walked across the bridge with no paperwork.
Oh my goodness.
No
Can you
paperwork.
imagine trying that now? They'd have you hung up by the
Anyway,
short
he made it.
fingers.
He made the train. He got off right here in Lyon Mountain, New York.
Yeah.
And next couple of days, he got a job.
Yeah.
But the funny, well, it wasn't the funny part of the story. A couple of years later, he was married to my Aunt Santina. He had a baby, Celestina, Tina,
Oh, I love the names.
Two-
Don't you? I love it.
2 years old. One Sunday afternoon, a couple of Spanish guys go over to the house, and a Mexican. He said, Pete, he said, let's go over to Cornwall and play some pool and drink some Canadian beer.
Of course.
So my Uncle Pete says right off, he said, no, he said, I don't go back to Canada because no papers. Guy says, well, I mean, they're not going to bother you, Pete. He said, let's go over, have a good time. They talked him into it. He says, we go over, we shoot some pool, we drink some nice Canadian beer. He says, on the way back, he says, we get stopped at the border. He says, I don't have no papers. You know what they did to my uncle for not having no papers? Good thing he was married to an American citizen. They left my uncle in Montreal for 6 months.
Come on. Can you
6
imagine that
months.
today? Huh?
And the only thing that saved Pete to being deported back to Italy was he was married to an American citizen. And after that, he became a citizen. He came, you know.
What a story. What a
Gotta
story.
have paperwork.
Yeah, well, today, of course, you do, and we've done stories on that. We got to move around.
But,
before
yeah.
we move, I
Anyway.
got to find out how you got the name Vess. I mean, I know, but you
Well,
gotta
when
tell people.
like I said, I came over here when I was 11, and we were in the 4th grade. I could not talk English. And I'm proud to say that nobody, there was 2, 3 of us kids. Manuel Pereiro was one of them. He was from Spain, and a couple of Mexicans, but nobody made fun of us in school.
Yeah.
You know how you read today, these bullies in school? We never went through that in our school. We never had no
Yeah.
bullies, or nobody laughed at me for not talking English. There was a lady in the 4th grade, her name was Winifred Pettershon, Bernard Amel's sister.
Come on.
Yeah.
I love it.
She taught me how to talk English. She kept me after school every night. Just her and I. We started from the alphabet,
Isn't
and
that amazing?
she never got time. She never got time and a half.
No, just did
Extra
it because
time.
she knew it was the right thing to do.
She was dedicated.
Yeah.
And in those days, I'm not ashamed to say, I had to go to the bathroom like everybody else. I used to raise my hand and point.
Yeah.
Gotta go. I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And but it seemed like I picked up the language. There's another lady from Dannemora. Her name was Marion Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
Great teacher, and she helped me quite a bit.
These
But
teachers
they
are wonderful.
kept passing me through, graduated, and with
So
all
let's
my
get to
friends.
the name,
and,
Vess. We got a whole-
the name.
Yeah.
My first name, as I told you, is Americo.
Yes.
Americo. Popular in Italy sometime. But we were studying about Amerigo Vespucci in school.
Yeah,
And a lot of kids, you know, in those days, even though Americo pronounced the same thing, they couldn't get to
Yeah.
it, and they started calling me Vespucci, and then it shortened to Ves, and everybody in
It's
Clayton
so much
County
better
knew
than
that.
Hey You, isn't it? I love
But anyway,
it. Isn't
that's
that
it.
great?
That's history.
So, yes? And Frenchie, how did it get to be
Well,
Frenchie?
to tell you the truth, the only way that I could tell you that I got the name Frenchie is, St. Francis. Of course, when he was,
Ooh,
he went.
there's good association.
Actually, his father, they were in France, so they called him Francisco or Francis. I was born on October 4th, 1926, which is St. Francis Day.
There you go.
So my father, they ever since I could remember, probably when I was going to school or something, I've never known anybody call me anything but
These
Frenchie.
associations are so amazing, aren't they?
We're talking nicknames, and I'm not going to get in all these nicknames. Everybody had
Yes,
a
you
nickname.
are. I know you are. I can see where
Everybody
you-
had a nickname in Lyon Mountain, New York, and I
course they
mean
did.
just about everybody. But the funniest one
How about-
that I know
What?
of, and I'll say it on camera, His name was Scratch Ass. Yeah, and Frenchy will back me up, he knew him. And the reason he got that name, I mean, it's not a bad name actually, but in a small town. When he walked up Sweden, we call it here, because a lot of Swedish people
That's right,
lived
sure.
on a hill.
Yeah.
He's always walking,
Oh, this
doing
way?
this. And his name stuck. Everybody in town called him Scratch Ass.
And we
That's about
won't,
it.
won't ask how Plink Tara Savage got
Plink,
it.
there's another one. There's another one.
So-
We had a lot of peanuts.
Oh, yeah, a lot of
A
peanuts.
lot of peanuts. We had snowballs,
Pickles.
pickles,
pickles,
big
of
head.
course. Some of them weren't too kind either, as I
know
remember
one-
when I was a kid.
I know one family, 2, 3 families, not gonna mention their names actually, but they all had a nickname. As of
Yeah.
today, I don't even know their first
Yeah.
name.
Isn't that amazing? Because that's all you ever
everybody,
called them. Teachers called them that and lots of other things.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing. I don't know where we're going with this, but yes. All right, we're back on. We're going to start in the area of the time clock. Why not?
Okay, time clocks are even used today, and in those days, every miner had a punch card. They come in and punch their time when they got home. When they got out of the mines, they punched L. And once a week, your paymaster went through the cards and overtime or 40 hours plus or whatever it was, and you got paid for it.
And we were lucky enough to get the original
the
time
original
clock that was
clock,
in the
there's
shop.
Rack.
How would you manage to get that? Where was it?
We used to have a man in Phillips Court, the new houses, who was a clock fixer,
Yeah.
a clock man. And when the mines went down, he was smart enough to say, well, if nobody's going to salvage this, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
So it was his descendant who brought it to us a
Is it
couple of years
that?
ago.
Oh,
But you
man.
can see through in the photo of the shop where they...
There it is on the
they
left-hand
punched. There
side.
it is
I
on
can
the
see
left-hand
it, right
side.
there.
Now, the company did not want the workers to dress after they punched in. They wanted them all dressed before they punched
Oh,
in.
sure.
So-
Didn't get paid travel time either. When you walked in, you
So
saw
that's why the dry house,
But yeah, but actually, see, that there is in the machine shop, or
right, the
or whatever
shop.
it is.
Yeah.
The one in the mines, when you were gonna go down into the mines, you were dressed up, you went by the clock.
Yeah.
And you punched it after you had your mining clothes on.
Right.
The dry house was like the shower room where each man had his own chain. And you'll see, you keep going up, Calvin. Gordy Little came in to work, he and I, you had your number. You dressed here, I dressed here, and there's your work clothes. So you took your regular clothes off, you pull a chain down, and that little basket up there, you put your wallet, you put your watch, you put your jewelry, your earrings, whatever you had on.
Yeah, sure. Picture that with the nose rings. Yeah.
You put your clothes on and put your chain up with your good clothes. You change into the mining clothes and put your own lock on it. Nobody would fool with your valuables.
That's a first to me. I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Not,
Never.
not only that, he forgot something important. Also in that bucket, you carried your own, like your soap. And your-
Soap and,
Oh, you did?
Oh,
Toiletry?
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you did, you
Yeah.
put everything you had, like you had your soap, you had your towel hanging up there. You had,
Yeah,
yeah.
but take a look.
So
How
that-
many chains would there be like that?
Oh, there was over 300.
Do you see the photo behind?
Here's a
Oh, my
picture.
goodness, wait a minute. Let's move over this way so Calvin can get it without a glare.
Yeah, right
Holy
there.
mackerel, look at that.
And the
See,
back,
all
they
the
had
chains.
sinks and shower.
Oh, my.
Shower rooms.
My.
And then on Saturday nights, we knew an older gentleman that took care of the dry house. And on Saturday night, 7, 8 o'clock at night, he'd let us in and take a shower. Kids.
Oh, see?
Because we didn't have showers in those
Oh, of
houses.
course. Are you kidding?
And-
we
and,
didn't know what
boy,
a
the
shower
shower
was
was-
anyway.
no.
We had a bathtub. and
You
maybe
got
we were
it.
lucky.
And I see sometimes 15, 20 kids at a time taking a shower.
I want to tell you something. It wasn't until when the union come in here, where we live in fact, most of the houses, with the exception of the cement block houses, there's few up here and all in the sand here, had of running water and toilets in the house.
See?
We had to go out to the old
Of course we did,
John,
the old primitive, the old
yeah.
black house, yeah.
And they had water tanks. They had one down here,
Yeah.
next to one up, going up to the works, and there was another one someplace. This is where, if we wanted water, we had to go get our water in the tub, bring it home. You know, this is all we got until the union got in here. Then they were made to put bathrooms and
That's another
running water.
good point.
You know?
There was non-union works here for a long,
Oh,
long
yeah.
time. When did the union come in? Does anybody know?
Oh, the union,
I think it was 1940.
I thought it was late 30s, but maybe
No, I
maybe
think
it was in the
late.
40s.
No, because J.R. Lenny
But,
was still here. I think it was 1940. I don't know, 46 or.
But there
it was
was-
it was the late 40s.
There was no union, but they had started some organizations that you had to pay $1.50 a week
Yeah.
to work up here. And
Here we go.
I didn't
Here
realize
we
it.
go.
I didn't realize it till I read Mr. Gooley's book,
The Black Hand.
The Black
Oh,
Hand. Because
yes,
you had to pay-
absolutely.
You had to pay $1 a week, but there was a person here by the name of Carlo Solino. You remember him?
Oh, Carlo.
Little Italian guy. And in the early 50s, my father used to get me up early in the morning on Saturday morning because Carlo Solino used to get the Italian papers from New York. And my father, boy, he read every page. So I used to go down and get the papers on Saturday morning, and every time he handed me the papers, his fingers were cut off right here. And I always said to myself, I wonder how he got his fingers cut off. I always thought he had an accident in the mines. Mr. Gooley did all the homework on this. They cut his fingers off with an axe because he didn't pay that $1 a week to work. Carlo Solino got his fingers cut off at a 45, just like this, because he didn't pay that
What a
buck a
story with
week.
the black hand.
Yeah, that's it.
Unbelievable.
And then after the Black Hand, the union kind of moved in and so forth. But good thing the union came in because the men here were not safety. Safety first was not, pushed. If OSHA operated in those days, the mines would not operate.
They'd be
Let me
closed
put it
down,
that
sure.
way, you know.
In fact, when the union took hold here, this is when J.R. Lenny said, "That's it."
Yeah.
He took off. He went
Yeah.
exploring down the Peru, South America. I guess that's
uh,
where he died or
yeah,
something.
that was the old man.
But then his sons took over as
And
district
Bill-
managers.
And then Bill was good to the
Oh,
town.
Bill-
helped the town. He was a great man. I think he died when he was 46.
Yeah, he did.
In Mineville. He went from here to Mineville as a plant manager. But what he did to the people here, everybody talked about him, that he helped the people. I know one funny story one time. My father never had a driver's license, never drove a vehicle in his life. And he went up to Bill Lenny, the son, one time, and he said, Bill, he wanted to borrow one of those big trucks, one of those big dump trucks. My father's name was Angelo, and he says, Angelo, what are you going to do with the truck? He says, I want to take it to Rochester and get a truckload of grapes and make wine. Well, Bill thought about it a little bit. He says, I'll tell you what. He says, I'll furnish the driver. Take the truck to Rochester and get this truckload of grapes. But he says, I want some wine. So they made a deal. And according to my uncle, the whole town was waiting for that truck. That truck
What
was
a
coming.
Saturday night that was.
The truck was loaded of grapes from Rochester, and my father did make the wine, and he gave Mr. Lenny, Bill Lenny, 15 or 20 gallons. I think he made 80 gallons, but after he passed it around.
Yeah.
So anyway, everybody loved that wine. The following year came the next September, and Bill Lenny himself went up to my father. He says, Angelo, he says, you going to do it again?
Isn't those,
But anyway, you don't do that today.
those are great stories. Margot, who made this bench?
Actually, my husband
I knew
did.
that.
He made a replica of it so that we could at least show people how that worked, and not, when they came up from the mines all black, they would put it up there, and it's called the dry house because they had fans underneath, and it would dry their clothes overnight.
Oh.
And then their basket would come down, and they'd go and shower, and then the next day they'd bring down their work clothes again. And I asked miners one time, I said, well, when did you didn't take them home to wash them? I said, how often did you take them home to wash?
Once a year.
And, even having...
Some did, some didn't.
I never heard of anybody stealing
No.
the watches or
See,
money.
that's a good point, too.
They were honest people. In fact, I mentioned stories about my Uncle Pete. He was the main bartender here after he got hurt in the mines. And when all the miners drank, they never carried too much money. They used to go in and charge it. Beer, they charged beer. When it was 25 cents, 15 cents. And I still got sheets home, little books that my uncle had for the miners. And 15, they charged beer all week, and on Friday, after payday, they come in and pay their bill. The store did the same thing, IGA store. You went in and charged everything. Friday, you went in, paid your bill. That was it. That's the way they lived. And,
I have one more story about the dry house.
Yes.
I did quite a bit of interviewing before we opened, and Pickles, Donald Tulusky, told me about how the dry house, Pickles and Peanut K.A. told us it was really quite a place to raise heck. And the men really let it out. It was like any locker room. They told dirty jokes and had a great time. They said, though, if anything happened down below, that was the quietest place, that it was, you could hear a pin drop.
Oh, yeah, right.
But Pickles told me the first day he went to work, he was like 18 years old, and they gave everybody a whole new outfit, brand new shoes and everything when they went to work the first time. And he sat down, he's tying up his shoes, and I don't remember the man who came over to him, but he said, "Those are nice shoes, Pickles. What size are they?" And Pickles told him, and he said, "Gee, if you don't come back up tonight, can I have them?"
Oh, God.
But they used to tease them all like that, you know.
Especially the young ones,
Oh, my. Put the fear of God in them, huh? All right, what's next over here?
Well-
this is some of the older equipment that was used in the mines.
Yes.
In fact, you see a lamp here that's still
Let me get over next to you. Oh, look at that.
with a flame.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you ever see the movie, the Molly Maguires
Yeah.
with Sean Connery, they wore that same type of helmet, but theirs were a coal mine, but the helmets were.
And what
the-
kind
the
of,
light-
would that be coal oil or what?
That'd probably be coal oil right there. They had a flame about 3 inches
Yeah,
long.
sure.
Burn your eyebrows.
Coal oil is like kerosene, right? Just so.
Here, let me get out of Kelvin's way or your way.
Oh,
He
he-
can get the.
But then after the oil, they went to carbide lamps.
Oh, they did, yeah.
And the miners told me that after they went to battery lamps, not all of them wanted to switch because the light from a carbide lamp, I guess, was really much better.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Water on the top of the lamp and the carbide on the bottom, and the
Sure.
water would drip.
But I think that probably the reason for that is the electric or the battery operated lights, I think, were more low piece, where this with the flame
Yeah.
Wider, wider,
wider
scope,
you know.
Right.
So you got a variety of the hats, the
Yeah.
helmets.
Right, and the safety
Belts.
belt, that loop right there that you see on the safety belt saved
Many
many.
lives.
Yeah, think about it.
Yeah, and another thing what they had to be careful though with the carbide lamps is that, when they were loading their holes and stuff like that, that flame, if they could possibly start,
Oh,
when
sure.
the fuse start, by the open flame.
I don't even want to think, you'd lose more than your fingers in a deal like that, wouldn't you?
Definitely.
Look at this down here. Does anybody know what that is down here in the corner?
The lunch pail?
That's a lunch
Yeah.
pail.
Look at it.
I can remember some of the miners going with the work with the lunch pail there like that.
That was common in a lot of households, not just in the mining.
Yeah,
We had one in
yeah,
our,
yeah.
we'd go down to the local grocer and fill it up with clam chowder once a week.
We had one miner. You remember what the black lunch pails looked like?
Yeah.
Well, this guy was a big eater. He welded two together.
Oh, come on.
He did.
No,
he did.
you're
His
stretching
name-
more than
his-
that.
He worked in the machine shop.
In the machine shop.
His name was Anthony Petrovsky.
Yeah, Pataki Petrosky. That was his name. Pataki.
I've heard, if I die on the way home, I'll die a happy man.
Gordy, his pail was 24 inches long.
That's hilarious. hilarious.
And in fact, here's another short story. When Ronnie's opened up,
No short stories with this guy. Come on.
Ronnie's Michigan's, when he opened up, this is a true story.
My wife works there right now.
Okay, she went down, Pataki went down and ordered 8 Michigans. So he ate all those Michigans. Here comes the girl when they had homemade pies there for dessert. Yeah. So she says, what kind of pie would you like? He says, I want an apple pie. So the girl brings out one
Piece of apple pie.
He says, bring me the whole pie.
Apple pie.
He ate the whole pie.
Welding the lunch pail together. You know, I worked on construction for years, thank God for those days. But we were going down into one of the jobs at Long Sault Dam on the St. Lawrence Seaway, and a bunch of us riding on the back of a truck to go down into the pour, as they called it, because I worked on a cement crew. And you jostled around the truck. My lunch pail, you mentioned black lunch, it jostled open, and my thermos full of black coffee fell out. And the truck ran over it. I checked it on the way out that night. I said it was flatter than a penny. Welding it together, that's the story.
You know something else? You see, you have a couple different size hats or shape hats and whatever. One is aluminum and the other one are fiber, whatever.
Yeah.
When they put the electric trolleys down in the mines, the aluminum hats went. They all had to put on fiber hats.
Oh, that makes sense too. Think about it.
On account of the...
Think about it.
Because these people riding by, they would ride back and forth to go to their jobs. They'd ride in one of the ore cars or something where they were going. And you know, the power lines that were up above.
Shorted out.
So they said, no.
Who would ever think of that? I'm so glad I came here today. Isn't that a great story? Yeah, we were remembering the different hats we used to wear in different construction jobs, and you know, if a wrench fell 75 feet and hit you in the head, it would kill you anyway. Never mind what kind of a hat you had on. That's wonderful.
These were the degree rules.
Yeah.
They
used them in arrays.
Yeah.
Once the engineers.
Yeah. Well, also the drillers in arrays. If they were going a certain degree, they had to have the degree rule to make sure that they're on the same plane, you know.
Right.
If it was 60 degrees, well, they had to go 60 degrees or whatever.
It was a different ball game when you were 2,200 feet underground in those days than it was working on a strip mine, you know, on a hillside or something, wasn't it, huh?
I know my father, I went down there once just to take a look around, and I don't know how the men worked down there. I know my father always worked 1,800, 1,500. He'd come home wet, and sometimes he had pains in his shoulder and pains in his elbow. Never missed a day's work. I used to have to shave him sometime because he couldn't read. You know, he was a shoe puller. We rubbed down.
I worked 7 years. I worked 7 years underground, but I was a repairman. I was a welder. We repaired all the tram cars and stuff, you know, and of course we had aluminum hats like that. But we didn't have to go. We were like on where they had workstations off the platform where you got off, so we didn't have to worry about that. So they let us wear our aluminum hats, you know, because we weren't around any power that supplied the electric trains with any power at all. So
you know, I've got a dumb question, but that's all right. Lots of people probably thinking about these things. Are a lot of these holes still open?
There's a few up on town property. I can't show you when we're going up.
They're not open.
There's a couple. We got a couple of bad sinkholes up there. What a sinkhole is.
Oh, no.
You're standing there, and the dirt and land just caves in.
Sure, whole houses, cars.
We got it fenced in, and somebody stole a fence from us.
Oh, come on.
Oh yeah, somebody. We got a lot of vandalism.
If you happen to come up here in the wintertime and look up on the side of the mountain, you will see still one of the holes there where you have steam coming out, because apparently there's the water hasn't reached that high, and apparently the wind goes in one place and it pushes that.
Yeah, those things.
And you know, the miners, everyone I talked to loved their work.
Yeah.
They loved being in the mines.
That's what I was going to say.
My father loved it. He loved it down there.
Well, there was a camaraderie and you've mentioned that before, every community has a camaraderie, but guys who do that kind of work stuck together
Oh, yeah.
through thick
Oh,
and
yeah.
thin. If you were in trouble, he'd cover your
yeah.
backside
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
on
yeah.
and so on.
That's
Yeah.
right.
All very important. Well, where are we going to go next?
There's a
We
bunch of
usually
pictures
just
here that
Go
will show
around
the
photograph.
hoist.
the different ages of the head frame. The top ones are when they were still doing surface mining.
Yes.
And then the lower picture of the head frame is the way it looked up until it closed in
See,
1967.
I wouldn't even know it was called a head frame unless you told me, yeah.
And those are the workings of the hoist.
And here, right over here. yeah.
Right. My dad was a hoistman for 4 years
was?
after he fell, and the belt saved him, but not
Really?
his legs.
Oh,
So,
boy, really?
Howard Wood was a hoistman
This
for
is the
years.
first. This is the first electric train that they had down there that they used.
Really?
Yeah, mules.
The mules, yeah.
They had. There's one.
Donkeys.
They're loading one in a skip right there to bring them down to the mines. That's a long time ago.
Or up, when they got electricity, they had to bring them up,
Yeah.
and they couldn't see. They had been deprived of light for so long, and they couldn't see when they got up.
Let me ask you where you got most of these pictures, from one place or from different people?
Different people.
Different
Really?
people. Pete and Reet, though, collected from different people.
Yeah.
And so they were a great source. And this was a good example here of what's called a shanty.
This
And
is
that
the-
was just dug out of in a drift,
There
right?
was a place. Yeah, it was a place. What they did is blocked off one end, and they had what they call grid heat down there, 440 to heat them up. And this year was cold down in the mine. If you didn't wear long underwear, you're going to freeze your butt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what they would do was they're in here eating their lunch.
Right.
That's where they'd go to eat their lunch.
Yeah, it was a little bit warmer in there.
Oh, yeah.
Peanut K.A. said that, those old lunch boxes, well, they'd be full, some full of stew, some full of other
Yeah.
clam chowder or
Oh, yeah,
whatever.
they-
And the men would come early and put them on the stove, and it'd be heating, and he
Oh,
said, such a
Ooh.
mixture
Oh,
of
yeah.
smell.
That's
When you
these-
walked in?
These grid heaters that they had there was really, really hot, and you could get burnt on them. I mean, they didn't get red, but I mean, it threw a lot of heat on.
That's
And
great.
See, this is one of the platforms. When you come down off, this is the shaft right here. When you come off the shaft, this is the platform. I don't know what level that is right there, but they're all about the same, all the levels where they come off.
And what they had was 3 skips that went down the head frame. And see, we had double-decker skips
Oh,
for the
right
men.
here, yeah.
Right. They held 12 and 12.
Yeah.
And men had to be very careful in it. Any horseplay in there, and you could lose
Yeah,
a head.
yeah.
These are the 2 war skips right here.
Right.
Like,
Well, one should be up at the head frame and one down, but
well,
that's
they-
the
yeah,
way,
but
when they were
could-
closed,
they could
that's
do
the
that.
way
Yeah, they could do that.
yeah. But normally they ran like that, one dumping and one filling.
We had, when you're talking names, Gordy, I'll just go through a few of them, nationalities. You got Keneminski, Bernuski, Marchese, Golovach, Korupski, Gonzalez, and
Rodriguez.
so Rodriguez. They're in,
All
all
nationalities. You
nationalities.
didn't mention
Yeah.
the keys over there in the corner, but you had to have keys
Yeah,
for
all
things,
keys.
right?
Yeah, they had keys like this up here.
And we were powered by air. The air compressor, it ran every day.
On the old,
Well, that's like all the old construction jobs. And
Yeah,
all
they
the
had
jobs that I
pumps.
worked on, the St. Lawrence Seaway, everything was on what they called a Christmas tree.
you
just
won't
hooked
see,
up
I don't know
to
if
it.
we got pictures of the big pumps that used to pump out the water in the mines.
I
They
imagine
were
that was
awesome. They
amazing,
were
huh?
awesome. Had big vacuum pumps, big water
Wow,
pumps.
wait.
That
big,
we don't have that I know of. I would love
They
some
had
of
a
that.
they had a Scranton pump on the 1263 level that would pump from 1263 all the way to the surface, 1,263 feet.
Can you imagine?
A water pump. It was huge. It was a huge pump.
People today don't think that they had technology back then, but that was, a lot of this stuff was state of the art for that time.
Actually, like down on the 600, they had a pumps there on the 600 level that pumped up. They had one on the 12. They had one down on the 18 level. In fact, even down on the 2363, which is the this is where they loaded the ore anyways, and of course they had to have a pump down there to keep the water from,
Of course.
you know. But you know, from the 21 level, they also started with the winds, what they call the winds from the 21 level. They went down to 2,600 feet from there, but they couldn't hold it. It was too hard to hold the ground.
Right.
They drilled a shaft down like I don't know, like on a 45 degree. It went down to 2,600 to the 2,600 foot level, you know, and they tried to work it. But what happened was the ground worked too much, so they give it up.
That's a half a mile underground when you stop to think about it, you know?
That's one thing they say about the Lyon Mountain mines is that a lot of the other mines in the area didn't have air blasts. What's another name for the air blast?
Oh yeah.
Vibrations,
rock bursts.
yeah.
Rock bursts. But our mine did have quite a few of those, and it was because, and see, our mine was at a 63, the ore was at a 63-degree level. So, and a lot of the other mines were a lot more shallow. So we did a lot of work with gravity, right, Frenchie?
What air blast she's talking about is like you're sitting at your kitchen table with
And you
a
have
plate,
an earthquake.
and you got to hold on to your plate. You're shaking a
No
little bit,
kidding.
like a version of a earthquake.
Yeah.
Same thing.
My father-in-law one time was walking down, I don't know if it was a drift, but one of the tunnels, and the ground just came up from the surface, hit the roof right in front of him, and if he had been just a few feet ahead, that would have been,
Well,
that would have
that-
been it.
Down on the 21 level, they had it. My uncle and old Mosgero and somebody else was driving drift. And in the meantime, they did have the air blast, and they were going in with their car, and this was a battery motor at that time.
Right.
Going in there, and what it did, the car went right up, it hit the roof because they had it raised up the tracks and everything at least 3 feet.
Right.
That's how bad these things were. Oh, it
killed
shook
many
the whole
people.
town. Actually,
Yeah, I
when they
never
had-
heard of that before
When they
today.
had a good air blast, it shook the whole town.
Right.
It shook the whole town. You'd swear that
So
you-
it was a place where earthquakes
Yeah.
were very common.
Yeah.
And it was because of the work they were doing in the mines,
They
and
called it an air blast.
Air blast. That's the only name.
Yeah,
or
that's
rock
what-
burst.
yeah, that's
I've
what they
seen it
call it.
written
Yeah.
both
Caused
ways.
by air, probably.
Yeah.
I don't.
It wasn't
Pressure, definitely.
dangerous enough by itself,
No,
right?
right.
You might as well have
We're
a,
used to that. I mean,
Yeah.
right, you're sitting there, you're
yeah.
vibrating.
But none of that happens
We
today,
didn't need
right?
those chairs
No.
back then.
You know why? Because the mines is full of water, and I don't
Yeah.
think they.
Oh, they're all full of
Yeah,
water?
they're
Right
full
up
of
to the
water.
top?
Yeah.
Now, we had a little earthquake here a month ago.
I remember
It
that.
was 3 o'clock in the morning.
Little tiny thing,
In
yeah.
fact, I was going right into the paper because one paper, Countryman or something, it says everybody in Lyon Mountain was sleeping. Well, it was 3 o'clock and I had to go to the bathroom.
Sorry, I was awake.
I didn't really shake,
Yeah.
but I heard it.
Isn't that
It felt like a
amazing?
rumble or a.
Like a
I
train
didn't
going
shake,
through.
yeah.
You better tell them people you weren't sleeping.
No, I wasn't sleeping.
Isn't that amazing?
They should know what it's like for older
So
people.
we got lots of photographs in this
Right.
place for people who are interested in more.
Here's a good example. New York Times in 1902 wrote about how rich our ore was. And that's from an article in the New York Times.
One of the world's largest deposits, there you go.
Right. And this was done to show people how there were different ways to mine. There was surface mining, and a good picture of surface mining is, I think, right here, where if they left the rock after it was blasted.
This is underground.
Right. If they left the rock when they blasted, then they used that for like a ladder. So that's a surface shrinkage stoping. But this way is when the developers would come through, and of course you have a level here, which is called a drift, and a level here. They're usually about 300 feet apart, between 150 and 300 feet. And then the developer would make manway raises about 300 feet apart, and then they would make chute raises with chutes underneath, and then sublevels in between, and the miners would go up the manway and down a sublevel and start blasting. All the ore would go into the chutes, and they'd keep going until this whole area was reamed out, except about 10 feet on either side of the manway. They'd leave these pillars. And you can see the men on the bottom of those, how large they were.
Can. Oh my goodness, yes.
This here is Duke Chase drilling right here.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
That's that Duke drilling right here.
And that would be a raise of some kind. I
Yeah.
don't know if it
Duke
was a
Duke
man
drill.
or-
He drove raises.
Heavy duty equipment.
Yeah.
Heavy duty.
Hydraulic, all air
That's
operated.
good
You gotta be
model
Superman
right there,
to work.
Richard will
This
tell
is
you
what he
about.
moves right
Let me
there.
get out of Calvin's way so I can see
Hey,
it.
that was their Sunday suit. Everybody wore
That was it?
oilskins.
Oh,
No,
yes.
but see the model of the raise? It's at 63-degree level, and Donald Tulusky made that.
Did he really?
He made the model of the raise, the original one.
I think I still have one of my old suits
You
like
know
that.
that
Oilskins.
From the old cement, pouring cement days.
You know that machine weighs about 98 pounds.
More.
They carry, and plus their steel they had to carry with them.
And some of these guys
And
weighed
then the
160
hoses.
pounds.
Yeah.
The hoses had to be connected because they had air hoses and water
They had air
hoses.
hoses connected to that. They had water hoses connected to that same machine.
Yeah. Think
They
about it.
they had to handle all of that.
So when they picked up a 42-ounce baseball bat, and all,
There you go,
No problem.
right? Now you know
That
the
was a
A
secret.
bottle of beer didn't weigh much after that, did it? Oh, that was amazing, equipment like that, and I've seen it in other mining operations around the country, and on some of the big construction jobs that I worked on in the 50s, there were huge bullet-shaped vibrators that weighed 70-some pounds, and you put it on your shoulder, and you climbed a wooden ladder, 180 feet, 190
Yeah.
feet.
Didn't
And
think
there was
nothing
no,
of it.
there was no other way to get it there but to put it on your back.
But
See,
even more impressive is, see that little board that runs across
At the bottom,
horizontally?
let's walk over this way a little bit so we can see
just
it. Come
before we
on.
leave that, I just want to point out that this, her, Anna Chase just recently died, and this was her husband. And,
That was her husband.
yeah, yeah, and my good friend Bill Chase, who does so much for Hometown Cable, that was his father.
Oh, it
It's a
was,
good
Duke
ex-
Chase was.
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's a good
okay.
example of the battery pack. Do you see the battery pack? And he also has
yeah,
the
sure.
degree rule in his pocket.
Yeah. Oh,
And I got to tell you too. This morning, Mert looked in the paper, and of course they sold these tickets for June. You know who won this morning?
You did?
Annie Chase.
Oh, did she?
She won, and here's poor Annie.
That was
She's already-
Vicky's,
Yeah, Vicky's thing.
Yeah.
Annie had that ticket.
Good.
She won the $50 this morning.
I wanted Gordy to lift one of these, we're talking about iron ore in them right here.
The 8-inch one?
Yeah.
That's the way, that's the size they
But
were.
anyway, when you lift this up, it's like I'm not saying you got these in your garden, but if you
I
did,
might have, you never
well,
know.
regular rock, but feel this one. This is iron
yeah.
ore.
Oh, yeah.
Feel the difference?
Is it? It's like picking up
Yeah.
an ingot, a gold ingot or an
Yeah,
iron ingot,
yeah.
sure.
Look at that one. Pickles brought that one in, carried it himself.
Come on. Wouldn't you know? He carried it in it.
That's Pickles.
Be
Is
careful
it?
you don't trip
I-
on it.
what?
Margot, I interrupted you here. What were you going to tell us about over here?
Oh, this, here, let me, this horizontal bench that they put in when they drilled the raise, that's what they stood on.
Yeah.
They supported the drill with this thing that looks like a broom handle and put that there, and then they were able to do their pattern, and they hoped they, drilled that same pattern every day so they could blast at the end of the shift. And before they did, they would put a hole on either side so that the next day after the blast, they'd be able to move this bench up 8 feet to the next day's work. But if you consider there are 300 feet between drifts, between levels, a raise could be almost like 250 feet above, and they're standing on this with that huge machine with a big hole underneath.
Think about that.
And only a man worked by himself in the
Oh,
dark.
yeah.
The only thing he had
There's
was
one
his
tough
hand.
guy right there, boy. I guess his lunch bucket didn't ever get run over.
No.
That he brought that in by himself.
Yes.
Pickles did.
That's what I was told. I wasn't here when he did
Did he
it.
build? He put together this corner?
Well,
built?
he built the first version of this raise, and it had the degree, and it had the way the drill was set up and everything. And in 2006, we just redeveloped the inside of it to look a little rockier for him. So it's been changed, and to make the holes look a little bit more, so that people could see that there was a pattern to it. And the fuses is how they timed the blast was important too, because the center ones around the center were the shortest fuses, and then on the side and then on the rib were the last, so they were the longest fuses. And it'd all be timed so the center would go and then next. And
It's all done by computer now, but it was a little bit different back in those days. There comes the train. I can hear it coming.
Yeah.
You know what? You know something else I want to mention before we leave this area, Margot, is these mannequins and the heads of the mannequins and how they came to be.
oh, well, there is a group of people from, I think it was Salmon River.
Yeah, I think Salmon River Central
Salmon
School,
River
the kids.
Central School. We had mannequins, but they didn't have heads. So what the art department did
love
for
it.
us was that they taught the children how to make a mask, a mold on a person's face, and then be able to, make a head. And
that
so
cool?
they used the teachers, the art teachers' faces, and learned how to make these heads for us.
That's wonderful.
They're very proud, and we're very proud of
What was
them.
this particular room in the original train station?
This was the men's waiting room, and
You had a men's waiting room and a women's waiting
that's
waiting room.
right. They had to separate them. They couldn't even buy their tickets in the same room.
See the old telephone over in the corner there? Don't you love it?
Right, right. And these were the hoistman signals, so that if there was something that happened where the hoist would have to go down, they would take the phone and ring if they were on the 600 level, 2, and then stop, and then, 3.
Everybody knew how many rings too, didn't they, boy? We asked the old miners, and they knew what the bells meant.
And that's a very dangerous job. The chute pullers, was it you who said that's what your dad did?
Who was the puller? Your
Now,
dad?
Father.
Yeah.
right here, this is the way he had to do it, all wooden chutes. And this is the way they changed. They became metal chutes, but still a very hard, and they had help with the mechanism.
The ore came down the chutes. Now, if they used to be called chunks. If the chunk was that big, it was too big. They had to blast it.
Right.
So
It would get stuck, and in the old days, they'd go up into the chute, try to remove
Oh,
the
my,
ore,
come
and
on.
many a death. No.
Oh, sure.
before they got a bonus, everybody worked on a little kind of bonus. But I remember the chute pullers had to load 40 of these cars in one shift before they got a bonus. 40.
Can you imagine?
And in this particular little homemade tool was done for me by Peanut K.A.
Oh,
Frederick.
there's his picture right there.
There's his picture. Now, he said that if they got,
They were dynamite.
if they were too large, they would stop, it would stop the chute. They couldn't get it out. So they would put the dynamite around the top and have a long fuse and light it and put it up there and then light it, blast it. And he said it was great to get the ore out, but then they'd have to rebuild the chute. So
Rebuild the whole chute.
Actually, they had to because it'd get hung up. It'd get hung up in a stope that's just coming down to the
course.
chute. And this is the only way, if it was hung up there, you look, and you don't want to go up there when you got chunks that weigh tons and
But
tons,
people
you know.
did, and they got killed.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, I'm not gonna use the language that.
Oh, God, I hope not. This is a family show, you know.
You see this chute right here?
Yeah.
Now, you see this? This is a timber, a log, what they call timber. What they call that is, you have to use your rear end to pick that
I
up.
think I get the picture.
They eventually went to air.
here, yeah.
So they went to air, which was just pull a little handle and the chute gate would open.
But they still were in the position on those old platforms
They were the
next
same.
to
They
them.
were the same way.
Yeah.
My,
That was a picture of the tugger box that went up the manway.
Way up in the left corner.
Yeah.
Right, that they would carry their equipment, and there was a wooden ladder that they could walk up to, and that's how men That's why it's called the manway. That's how they got to
Manway,
their
yeah.
dirt.
There's a great picture because you can see there's no room for a driller. And the stopes there, see up top of his head, sometimes you got cave-ins there, no chance at all, and that's it.
That's it.
There's the drilling holes, something like that, it's a shorter version, but there's a good safety, what the miners went through.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was hooked to what they call a column.
Yeah.
And they hooked the drill to that just like you do to your tripod, you know.
Sure.
But this is how they otherwise when they were working the stope off on the bench to drill the bench out, this is the thing they used right there, the jackhammer.
Right.
Yeah,
One of
I
the
worked
safety
a few of those too.
things,
Yeah.
one of the safety things, though, they said the first thing you did was to check for what's called loose. And in the older days, they'd use a bar and, check the ceiling
poke it up
for
there,
loose.
yeah.
In the later days, they'd use the water hose and spray it to see if it was safe.
High
But
pressure, yeah.
a lot of men got hurt that way too by loose falling.
These are the bits down here if you want to
Here
see
are the bits.
what it looks like.
That's right.
A lot of us have seen different things like that, but never quite this way.
And this, can you get a picture of that?
I'm sure we
And
can.
maybe
Yeah, let me
French
get over
can tell you
here.
the name of that, but that's what they used to have on the side to tie the rope to that pin. Patent pin.
They were called patent pins.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
See, actually, what they did, what they did is the company would buy some patent pins. I mean,
He's trying to get over your shoulder with the camera there, Frenchie.
Okay. The company would have to buy patent pins, but then what they did is, in the shop, they'd make their own.
Make them, of course.
So, I mean, they see what it was, so.
They can make anything in the shop. and-
See, actually, I'll drove this in the hole, how it's tapered,
Oh, yeah.
then they put this on it, drive this in the hole, and it wouldn't pull out.
Watch your-
See?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
excuse
okay.
me.
That's all right.
But this is how they would make. They'd hook their cable, or they'd hook their stuff to bring it up to where
Sure.
they're working.
I can understand how it works now, sure.
Yeah.
See, if you stayed down there, you wouldn't have this right
I know.
here.
Join the club. Most
If you can get a picture of the explosives on the boxes, watch your feet.
step
Frenchie.
there, old Frenchie.
That's the way DuPont used to come in with the dynamite salespeople spent money. In the bar, you didn't buy a drink.
Also,
No.
people like Gardner Denver and Ingersoll Rand and
All the
stuff which
equipment
sold the
guys.
equipment. See?
They spent a lot of money. Well, they made a lot
They
of
were
money.
promoters just like they are today.
You got it.
Can we scoop into this process area?
We can come
before
right
we-
back here, yes. We'll follow you anywhere, Margot. We're talking with Margot Karofsky and Des Pavetta and Frenchie Saskevich at the Lyon Mountain Mining and Railroad Museum. We haven't even talked about railroads, but that may be another day. Let me get over here next to you. All right, what have we got here?
Before we see the diorama, I like people to see this so they see how it all works. But down below, after the ore goes into the ore cars and dumps into the ore chute, it goes to a crusher. And this is the size, 8 inches or smaller, that it's sent up to the head on the skip to the head frame. And in the head frame, they had another crusher. From the 8 inches, it was crushed to 4 inches. And before it even went to the concentration plant, and then in the concentration plant, of course, it goes through a series of crushers and electromagnetic separators. So they only kept the ones that had the most iron in it, and it kept continuing being crushed and concentrated until it was a fine ore. The ore without as much iron in it went in our piles.
Oh, yeah.
And in the crude silos, though, there were all kinds of different size rock, because they had a whole other business people didn't know about, selling the rock different sizes to different companies. But this is what people know us for, those big ore piles. And the ore that had the most iron in it was sent to the pug mill where it was mixed with coal and water.
That's Pug Mill, P-U-G?
P-U-L-L.
Oh, Pull Mill.
No, Pug Mill. Let me see. Pug, P-U-G, you're right.
P-U-G, like the dog.
Pug Mill.
Okay.
And then it was like a slush and went on these conveyor belts where a big fire with a fan over the top. It was very hot fire. I never learned how hot.
I actually made it into cindered ore
Right,
when it
that's
got
what
down into
happened.
the.
Right, it burned off all the fuel and you ended up with what was ore sand solidified. Feel that one,
Right.
Gordy.
I imagine that's pretty heavy. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't be able to throw
This
that to home plate probably.
And this is the stuff that when it was really, in fact, when they would dump it in the rail cars at the cindering plant, it light up the whole town. That's
Oh,
how.
no
that's,
kidding.
That's how bright it was. I mean, it was so hot, and it was, you know, and what the railroad cars they had. Well, we'd call it sprinkler system, but what they had is they had pipes with holes in it, so that when the car went under there, the water was always running, so that it would. These were red hot when they come out, probably white hot, you know.
Yeah.
And it, what it do, it'd cool it off when it was in the railroad car.
And then they'd send it off, and up until 1939, 38 or 39,
Standish.
they went right up the road to Standish. We had our own furnace.
That's what they did. Pig.
And after the process in the furnace, they would scoop off what was on the top, which is called slag. Sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes the impurities make it look like a beautiful crystally thing.
Big old slag piles, huh?
Big slag
Yeah.
pile. And then what was on the bottom was iron. This probably just fell on the ground and dried the way it was, but they usually were poured into what's called pigs. That's right, isn't
Yeah,
it?
they were big, all right.
And they had forms. We have one on the other side that you can see. And this one, of course, was made especially for advertisement. Had our name on it.
How about that, huh?
Some of-
Them are not
Bocce balls.
no,
It's not cannonballs either.
and they're not balls that they fired from a cannon.
Yeah.
These here were in ball mills. This is.
Oh, look
they
at
they had
that.
these in there, and what they would do, they'd mix up with they'd break up all the.
That was one of the crushers.
Just roll around.
Yeah.
Roll around, do the job.
And then they had rod.
What they had
mills,
also had
too.
a rod mill. Would do
Right.
the same thing. What they call a rod mill. And
The
same as the ball
rock
mill.
would roll with rods.
Yeah, we're getting a great education here today. Shall we move
Wait
around?
till you see the diorama. The
All
men-
right, we're ready to move.
Bill Kassam and Jim Davis built this diorama after interviewing with the miners and a lot of study of pictures, like the one over here of the way the mill looked
Yep.
in the 40s. There's a good aerial shot of the way we looked in the 40s, 50s. So it's right around
Let's
the
go
corner.
around the corner. As we talked about earlier, this will be part one of the Mining and Railroad Museum in Lyon Mountain because there's so much to talk about, so many great stories, and so much to see. Somebody said show and tell. It sure is. Margot, this you mentioned before we came around the corner that this is a diorama, obviously. People, kids, and big people can come here and push buttons and find out what they got here. Tell me a little bit more about it.
A man named Bill Kassam who built the models down in the Transportation Museum.
Oh.
And the diorama that's down in Port Henry was the man that came and did this with a good friend, Jim Davis. And it was finished in October of last year.
It was.
Yes, and well, I guess you could see that the dry house on the left of the head frame, that's where that bench was that you saw
Okay, people
earlier.
can get a little better perspective here, huh?
And then here is the head frame right there with the skip.
The light just came on, yep.
One of the ore skips is dumping as we speak.
I see
And
it,
the
yeah.
man skip is almost to the top, and the second of the ore skips is being loaded
Down below here,
Right.
underneath here, because this is, this goes right from the surface all the way,
Yeah.
all the way down.
Right. The building you see in the center is called Number 3 Mill because in the earlier years it was their mill. Later, when the concentration plant was built, it became their shop and machine shop and storage, things like that. But it's one of the buildings that exists. And then you can see how the ore went on conveyor belt down into what's the concentration plant. See the long building there?
Oh, yes.
That's where the crushing and the concentration happened. And of course, the leftover ore went into the piles. And those are the fine silos that went into the sintering mill. This is the sintering plant right here.
Gotcha.
That turned it into that
Got the
solid
good
iron.
reach there, yeah.
That went into the ore cars and off it went to Standish Furnace from here.
That will give you a super idea. See, the mines went down and then branched out.
Back in.
It went down, branched out.
From east to west, towards,
Yeah,
East
and
to west.
towards Shadow
they're
Beach,
full of
Shaky
tunnels.
Lake.
The only thing they got here, they got, I don't know, this is the east side right here, and the other side is the west. They don't show the west side
Right,
here.
No.
right.
But it looks the same thing.
Yeah,
It
it'll give
would
you
be
a
the
great
same thing.
idea right there to how the operation was. And next time you come up, you're gonna be sitting on top of that pile. Right
No
on top.
kidding.
Right on top.
Yeah,
As kids, we used to climb that 4 days a week.
over and over and over
Over
again.
and over.
Forest
With the
line.
girls, of course.
Oh, sure.
Teenage girls. Up on the top.
The, do you see that little, that looks like a crank and a scraper? When the ore wasn't, when they were stoping at a level that wasn't very vertical, they would have to scrape the ore into the chutes. See the little chutes down there?
Yeah.
So sometimes they had to use a scraper method.
Hold it. All right, we had a bad focus there because of the way the camera angle was. So this is the what?
The number 10, where that 10 is, shows you
Yes.
the scraper. When the ore was not very vertical, it had to be scraped into the chute. 13 shows you a chute. And over here also, when the chute is being opened and the ore goes in the ore car, they drive it over here to a weigh station. And then the ore car is dumped into the crusher and then down into the ore bin. And this shows how the drifts were dug out and mucked. That's a shovel for mucking.
It's good to have a diorama like this
Left for
You want to
Jim.
see?
because it does kind of
This is the
paint your
bucket-
picture.
This is a bucket ore sand that they look. You want to see how much ore is in that sand?
Look at that. That-
That's ore right there.
Sure.
See?
Isn't that sticks to the magnet?
Yeah.
I get calls.
Somebody used that for bingo somewhere, I bet
Yeah.
you.
I get calls quite a bit to samples.
Really?
I just sent one. I got a call from Rochelle, New York last week, and I sent them maybe a pound of sand.
That would be
And the
New,
post office.
New Rochelle down by New York
New
City?
Rochelle.
In
And
there?
this
Yeah.
guy's an investor. He heard about our sand pile. Avenues now to sell some of our sand, and that's about it.
So there is a market for some of those sand piles
I hope so. We've been selling sand now to a Canadian firm
for sandblasting.
for sandblasting for 17 years.
Aha.
And they hauled a lot of sand away. They're doing it right now, but this is the only source of income for the town. And
You always
you know,
have two or three things working, though, Vass.
I had to, raise taxes and borrow money for a new building, and you got to keep plugging. And I hope I find some other source for the sand people. We got plenty of sand for a while, and
Well, our next program, Chapter 2, Margot, will be on top of that sand pile. Thank
Yes,
God
we
they
will.
knocked it down a little bit. We won't have to climb too hard. We can drive
no,
up
you
there.
can walk flat.
You know, Calvin and I very seldom plan these programs out ahead of time. It's obvious, I hope to our viewers, that we never write a script. So some things come out of our mouths that we don't intend, but who cares?
Especially mine.
It's been a wonderful education. I'm so glad you invited us up here this time. Once again, I want to let people know that we're at the Lyon Mountain Mining and Railroad Museum on the Standish Road, In the wonderful old railroad building.
D&H.
The D&H Railroad Building station is right here. People can come up what days?
Wednesdays and Saturdays, 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, through October 15th.
This requires a lot of volunteer hours, a lot of help from so many people. If we've not mentioned your name, we'll try to get it in next time.
Gordy,
there are so many people.
if you've got a couple minutes, this is what she was talking about, a scraper. There's a picture of what they look like a scraper stump looks like right there.
Oh,
You
I
see,
see.
it's
I
hooked
see.
up there.
He painted himself, by
He
the way.
painted. He
Oh,
painted
come
that.
on.
He looks just like that. Bob Dale.
is it?
Same thing.
Bob Dale.
He painted
Dale,
himself.
by name Bob
Is
Dale.
it?
He worked in there.
I mean,
He
he
painted
was,
that.
he was a good painter. He painted himself right there, too.
Yeah.
The guy on the left.
Yeah. I thank you for inviting us again. If people want to make a contribution, they can become a member for how much?
$15 for the year,
And forever?
$500
Yeah,
for
that's
lifetime.
mine.
And they can send the money or inquiries to the Friends of Lyon Mountain, Box 262, Lyon Mountain, New York, 12952.
Look on Larry Gooley's Bloated Toe Enterprises website for a lot more information. Chapter 2 will be coming. Thank all three of you for being with us today.
Thank you very
Frenchie,
much.
Vess,
Thank
Margot,
you.
you are the best. I've learned so much.
Thank you
I
for
can't
having
wait to
us
go
here.
out and
Yeah.
tell other people and then get this on the internet at Plattsburgh.com and HometownCableNetwork.com, plus your local cable services, so it will be seen
Wonderful.
around the
I
world.
would like to personally thank Calvin and Gordy for taking the time and helping us
From
out.
all of
I
us.
think you can see how much we both enjoy this. It's
I did
wonderful.
too.
There's nothing better than preserving the history. All you people and all those unseen faces out there who have made this possible. There's sometimes I know, because I watched it happen, that it didn't seem like it would ever come to fruition, but here it is. We're grateful for you people and all the other people out there that helped.
Again,
Actually,
thank you.
we had to start this. We had some pretty good benefactors.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the roof was a guy donated the whole roof. He donated the whole roof. And
Somebody bought
I
the
mean,
station.
you know,
Somebody bought the station and it went from there.
Yeah, you know, it's
So many parts to this puzzle, and now it's coming together, and I, for one, am thrilled and delighted.
Do you want to get an ending shot at the memorial wall before you
We
leave?
can do that right now.